CNN is learning of a contentious weekend phone call between Joe Biden and some House Democrats, and the details show just how dug in the president is and also how resistant he is to entertaining some valid concerns about how his debate performance has eroded some key support. Sources say at one point during the call, President Biden lashed out at Congressman Jason Crow, who is a moderate Democrat, after Crow said bluntly that voters are concerned about Biden, especially on the world stage. The president reportedly told Crow, who is an Army Ranger who served in Iraq and Afghanistan, that he knows Crow is a Bronze Star recipient like his son Beau, but that he, Crow, quote, didn't rebuild NATO. After that, the call only grew more contentious as Crow pushed back, telling the president the voters aren't seeing him that way. And that's when Biden told Crow, quote, I don't want to hear that crap, and said the congressman could walk away if he wanted, to which Crow said he didn't want to walk away, but Biden, angry, replied that Crow should just walk away. Our sources say that Biden also had a tense exchange with Congresswoman Chrissy Houlihan of Pennsylvania. Houlihan reportedly telling the president that she was concerned about his standing in a key county in her battleground state, but Biden pushed back and suggested he didn't believe her. Houlihan then told Biden that she had polling to back it up. And according to our sources, Biden responded by telling Houlihan he'd send her talking points of everything that he'd done for Pennsylvania and reminded her that he had married a Philly girl. Joining us now is Democratic Congressman Jared Moskowitz of Florida. Sir, thank you so much for spending a little time with us this afternoon. Were you on that call?
I was on that call.
So you heard this, Houlihan saying that she has polling that shows he's in trouble, and the president's response is to say that he'll get her talking points. Why do you think the president is dismissing what appear to be some valid concerns backed up by data?
Well, look, I'm not going to talk about the details of those calls. I will confirm that there were some tense exchanges with members. I will give you kind of an overall viewpoint of kind of the back and forth exchanges. Is I'm deeply concerned that the president's circle, the people who are working around the president, who quite frankly have kept him in a bubble for some time, are also not giving him the facts and the polling data on the ground. They're not showing him what we're seeing in our districts, what we're seeing in the polling and the movement, and in fact, the consistency of that polling. And if it wasn't consistent, it's only in a downward trend. And so, look, these discussions are ongoing. That's not the only call that has happened since then. But, that is the concern that's going on right now within the Democratic House caucus.
The conditions that were laid out by the Biden campaign, according to our reporting, for his considering stepping aside were poor performance in fundraising, in interviews, and polling. Do you think that the president is meeting his own metrics?
Well, they 3 for 3 on that one, if those are the guidelines that they're setting. But look, the president will have to make that decision on his own. You can't force a president out of his race. He's going to have to get there. But ultimately, we're trying to defeat Donald Trump, right? And right now, this has become a referendum on Joe Biden for the last several weeks since the disastrous performance. Donald Trump's had an unbelievable streak of luck, both in the courts and, thank goodness, ducking an assassination attempt, a heinous attempt, an attack on democracy by a domestic terrorist, in my opinion. But we need to settle back down and realize the compare and contrast between the Democratic agenda and the Republican agenda, especially with the doubling down of J.D. Vance. With that pick, women's issues are clearly on the ballot in November, as they were on the ballot in the midterms of 2022.
I do want to talk to you about that assassination attempt. You are on the House Oversight Committee, and there are some important developments there. But I do have one more question for you about the politics of this presidential race, which is that we also have some new reporting today about DNC plans to move forward with a virtual roll call and nomination of Biden ahead of the convention, so that it's set well before the DNC starts August 29th. It's kind of like getting legally August 19th, I should say. It's kind of like legally getting married before the wedding, sort of a comparison there. Originally, they were going to do this because of that Ohio requirement for him to be on the ballot, but that concern has been dispensed. Do you worry about this move to rush things?
Yeah, I don't know why we're bringing back the policies of COVID to do the virtual nomination process. I mean, this clearly had to do with when the dates of the convention were set versus when the states were setting their process. But I think that ship sailed well long ago. This was set well before the debate that they were going to do this virtual nominating process. So it has nothing to do with what has transpired. But look, I think again, the data is the data. And look, there are 3 races going on. Obviously, it's the race to defeat Donald Trump, which is extremely important to reelect Joe Biden. And then there's the race for the House and the race for the Senate. And there are a lot of folks out there, myself included, that saying, look, we got to defeat Donald Trump. That's #1 goal. But at the same time, if we can't do that and Donald Trump happens to win the election and the country is going to give Donald Trump the wheel, we got to make sure that there are breaks. And that's why winning the House and the Senate is also equally as important.
Turning now to the attempt on former President Trump's life this past weekend, do you think the Secret Service director, Kimberly Cheadle, should resign?
Well, I can tell you there's reports now that after agreeing to come to the oversight hearing on Monday, which, by the way, should be a bipartisan hearing, because at the end of the day, it happened to be Donald Trump, but it could have been Joe Biden, could have been one of my colleagues. The politics of who it was doesn't matter to me. There was an assassination attempt on a former president. That's an attack on our country. It's domestic terrorism. And America's enemies are loving what's going on in this country with Americans fighting Americans. And so the hearing on Monday is important to get down to the failures. I'm a mile away from Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, my high school. I'm in Parkland. And after the shooting and we investigated the failures, the sheriff of the county was removed from office due to the lack of training and the lack of response by officers. And so there has to be accountability. You can't just have a failure where a former president almost gets assassinated and there's no accountability. That's what Americans hate sometimes about the federal government, is that when they see things that go wrong, almost no accountability. And so I'm hearing now that she may not come after agreeing to attend the hearing on Monday. I can tell you if she doesn't show up on Monday, absolutely she should either resign or be fired. But if she comes on Monday, we need to do a thorough investigation to find out all the details. And then the chips can fall where they may. But there has to be accountability for what went on over the weekend.
She was subpoenaed, as we understand it. Is that your understanding?
Yeah, she's been sent a subpoena because after agreeing to come on Monday, all of a sudden there was some waffling on whether or not she would be able to attend. I support that subpoena, by the way.
All right, Congressman, thank you so much.